You think working-class Americans only ate fried liver and hot dogs? Think again. From neck bones simmered into rich gravy to mock chicken legs that fooled dinner guests, these 25 forgotten blue-collar dinners fed real families through the Depression, World Wars, and hard times, stretching every dollar and using every scrap with pure American ingenuity. Neck bones and beans, the ultimate waste not, want not protein bomb that turned butcher scraps into Sunday supper gold. In the 1930s through the 1960s, urban butchers across Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Chicago would practically give away pork neck bones, those knobby vertebrae left after cutting prime chops. African-American families migrating north during the Great Migration brought Southern cooking wisdom that transformed these throwaway bones into family treasure. You'd simmer those bones for 3 to 4 hours in a heavy pot with onions, garlic, and bay leaves until the meat fell off in tender shreds and the marrow melted into a rich, gelatinous broth. Then you'd add navy beans or pintos that had soaked overnight, letting everything cook down until thick and creamy. The collagen from the bones created this silky, almost gravy-like consistency that coated every bean. This wasn't just dinner, it was survival cooking elevated to art, feeding 6 people for under $2. Before we move on to the next food, don't forget to subscribe for more nostalgic videos from the 1930s through the 1980s. Mock chicken legs. The Depression-era illusion that turned ground pork and veal into something that looked like prosperity on a plate. During the 1930s and lingering through the 1950s in thrifty households, these formed drumsticks let families serve something that resembled the Sunday chicken dinner wealthy folks enjoyed. Butchers would grind cheap cuts of pork and veal together, which you'd season heavily with sage, thyme, salt, and pepper, then mold around popsicle sticks or wooden skewers to create that drumstick shape. The shaped meat got rolled in beaten egg, then dredged in breadcrumbs or cracker crumbs before frying in a skillet until crispy and golden brown. Served on a platter, these mock drumsticks looked impressive enough to fool dinner guests at first glance. The taste was rich and savory, the texture surprisingly similar to dark meat, and the presentation gave families dignity during hard times. This was cooking as performance art, where appearance mattered almost as much as sustenance, letting working families maintain pride even when genuine chicken remained out of reach. Meatloaf with ketchup glaze. Meatloaf with ketchup glaze was the ultimate American dinner workhorse, appearing on tables from apartments to farmhouses at least twice monthly. From the Depression through the 1970s, this humble loaf stretched ground beef further than any other preparation, mixing it with breadcrumbs or crushed crackers, eggs, milk, and diced onions to bulk up the meat. Working-class cooks added whatever needed using up, leftover oatmeal, rice, even mashed potatoes to make the expensive beef go further. You'd pack this mixture into a loaf pan, though smart cooks free-formed it on a sheet pan so the edges got crispy all around. The signature move was slathering the top with a mixture of ketchup, brown sugar, and sometimes mustard that caramelized into a sweet, tangy glaze as it baked. After an hour in the oven, you'd have this beautiful mahogany loaf that sliced cleanly, with moist, tender interior and crusty edges. Served with mashed potatoes and green beans, meatloaf was reliable, comforting, and guaranteed to provide tomorrow's meatloaf sandwiches, arguably even better than the original dinner. TV dinners. TV dinners revolutionized American eating, turning dinner into a personal tray of convenience that changed family dynamics forever. When Swanson introduced the first TV dinner in 1953, turkey with cornbread dressing, peas, and sweet potatoes in an aluminum tray, working-class families discovered they could skip cooking entirely. You'd buy these frozen dinners for under $1, slide the foil tray into the oven for 25 minutes, and serve everyone their own complete meal without dishes to wash beyond the fork. The turkey came pre-sliced, the sides pre-portioned in their little compartments, and everything emerged steaming hot with that distinct institutional cafeteria flavor. Families would eat these in front of the television, hence the name, breaking the tradition of gathered dinner table conversation. The food was never spectacular. The turkey dried out, the peas were mushy, the desserts were tiny, but the convenience was revolutionary. This dinner represented post-war American efficiency and the beginning of our fast food culture, where time mattered more than homemade quality, and individual consumption replaced communal eating. Fried liver with mashed potatoes. Fried liver with mashed potatoes was the iron-rich powerhouse that kept steel workers and miners functioning before vitamin supplements existed. From the 1920s through the 1960s, beef or pork liver cost a fraction of steak prices, making it the go-to protein for families watching every nickel. Mothers would soak thick liver slices in milk for an hour to draw out the bitter, metallic taste, then dredge them in seasoned flour mixed with salt, pepper, and sometimes paprika. The liver hit a screaming hot cast-iron skillet with bacon grease, cooking just 2 minutes per side until crusty brown outside but still slightly pink inside. Overcooked liver turned into shoe leather that even hungry kids refused. Meanwhile, potatoes boiled until fork tender got mashed with butter and milk into creamy clouds. The key was cooking onions low and slow in that same bacon grease until caramelized and sweet, then piling them over the liver. This dish meant business. It delivered the nutrients exhausted bodies needed after 10-hour shifts in dangerous conditions. Tamale pie. Tamale pie, the southwestern casserole that brought Mexican flavor to American church potlucks and union hall dinners. During the Depression and through World War II, Southwestern families from Texas to California created this budget-friendly interpretation of authentic tamales, which required expensive mesa and time-consuming corn husk wrapping. Ground beef, the cheapest protein available, got browned with onions and simmered with canned tomatoes, chili powder, cumin, and olives if you could afford them. The magic happened when you layered this spicy meat mixture in a deep baking dish, then topped it with cornmeal batter made from cornmeal, milk, eggs, and a touch of sugar. As it baked, that cornmeal topping puffed up golden and crusty, creating a cornbread lid that soaked up the savory juices below. The bottom stayed moist and spicy, while the top turned crispy and slightly sweet. This wasn't authentic Mexican cuisine, but it was working-class ingenuity. One pan, one oven, feeding 8 people with ingredients from the corner grocery. Vienna sausage and rice. Vienna sausage and rice was the quick-fix protein that kept families fed when the paycheck ran thin toward month's end. These tiny, pale sausages packed in cans appeared in working-class pantries from the 1940s onward as emergency rations that lasted forever on the shelf. You'd pop open the can, drain the gelatinous liquid, and either heat those little sausages in a skillet or dump them straight from the can over steaming rice. Some cooks got fancy, making gravy from the can liquid mixed with flour and milk, or adding soy sauce for Asian-inspired flavor. Others simply served them with ketchup or mustard. The texture was soft and slightly spongy, the flavor mild and salty, and kids either loved them or refused to eat them under any circumstances. This meal cost under 50 cents total and took 10 minutes from pantry to table. It wasn't impressive or nutritious or particularly delicious, but it was protein and carbs when nothing else was available. This was survival eating, the kind of dinner that kept families going between paychecks without drama or pretense. Beef and noodle casserole. Beef and noodle casserole stretched precious ground beef through another dinner with the magic of egg noodles and cream of something soup. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, this casserole appeared at potlucks, funeral dinners, and Tuesday night tables across Middle America. You'd brown ground beef with onions, season it simply with salt and pepper, then mix it with cooked egg noodles and a can of cream of mushroom soup thinned with milk. Some versions added frozen peas or corn, others threw in a can of tomatoes for color. The whole mixture went into a buttered casserole dish, got topped with shredded cheddar cheese and maybe some crushed potato chips for crunch, then baked until bubbly and golden. The noodles absorbed the creamy sauce, the beef added savory depth, and the cheese melted into gooey strings. Turkey tetrazzini. Turkey tetrazzini transformed Thanksgiving leftovers into creamy, golden-topped elegance that made Monday night feel like a celebration. Created in San Francisco around 1910 and named after opera singer Luisa Tetrazzini, this casserole hit working-class kitchens during the 1950s when cream of something soups made every housewife feel like a gourmet chef. You'd cube leftover turkey and toss it with cooked spaghetti, sautéed mushrooms if the budget allowed, and a sauce made from cream of mushroom soup thinned with turkey broth and sherry if you were fancy, milk if you weren't. The mixture went into a buttered casserole dish, got topped with breadcrumbs, mixed with melted butter and Parmesan cheese, then baked until bubbly and golden. The name sounded sophisticated, the presentation looked restaurant quality, and the taste delivered comfort in creamy, cheesy waves. This was aspirational cooking for families climbing toward middle-class dreams, turning a humble turkey carcass into something that felt special enough for company. Ham and broccoli casserole. Ham and broccoli casserole took the Easter or Christmas ham bone and stretched it through another 3 dinners with 1960s processed food magic. After the holiday feast, frugal cooks would cube every scrap of leftover ham while frozen broccoli florets, a modern miracle in working-class kitchens, thawed on the counter. You'd blanch that broccoli just until bright green, then layer it in a greased casserole with the ham cubes. The sauce was pure convenience food alchemy, cream of mushroom or cream of chicken soup, whisked with milk, sharp cheddar cheese, and maybe a dash of mustard powder for zip. Pour that creamy mixture over everything. Top with crushed Ritz crackers mixed with melted butter and bake until golden and bubbling. The broccoli stayed slightly crisp, the ham got tender, and that cracker topping added essential crunch. This was suburban casserole culture at its peak, where opening cans and bags counted as cooking, but the result still brought families together around the Formica table. Johnny Marzetti. Johnny Marzetti, the Midwest's answer to lasagna that fed church basements, school cafeterias, and family reunions from Ohio to Indiana. Created in Columbus, Ohio, in the 1920s at Marzetti's restaurant, this baked pasta casserole became the ultimate community dinner because you could make it in industrial quantities for pennies per serving. Ground beef got browned with onions and green peppers, then simmered with canned tomato sauce, tomato paste, and Italian seasonings that made every kitchen smell like an immigrant grandmother was cooking. Elbow macaroni or egg noodles boiled until just tender, then everything got mixed together with generous handfuls of shredded cheddar cheese. The whole mess went into rectangular hotel pans or casserole dishes, topped with more cheese, and baked until bubbly and slightly crusty around the edges. The beauty was its forgiving nature. You could add mushrooms, olives, or whatever needed using up. This wasn't refined Italian cuisine. It was American pragmatism, feeding factory workers and their families with carbs, protein, and cheese in one glorious, scalding hot scoop. Fish sticks with tater tots. Fish sticks with tater tots, the frozen food revolution that turned every Friday into Catholic fish night and every weeknight into a 15-minute miracle. When Gorton's introduced breaded fish sticks in 1953 and Ore-Ida launched tater tots in 1954, working mothers discovered their secret weapon against exhaustion. You'd preheat the oven, dump frozen fish sticks on one side of a baking sheet and frozen tater tots on the other, then slide it all in while still wearing your work clothes. 20 minutes later, dinner was done, crispy, golden, and requiring zero thought or skill. The fish sticks delivered mild, flaky white fish inside a crunchy coating, while tater tots brought that salty, potatoey crunch kids devoured by the handful. Served with ketchup for the tots and tartar sauce for the fish, if you were fancy, this meal symbolized post-war American convenience culture. It wasn't homemade in the traditional sense, but it was fast, affordable, and consistent, the holy trinity for families where both parents worked. This dinner said, we're modern now, embracing technology and convenience without apology. Chicken fried steak with white gravy. Chicken fried steak with white gravy was the Southern working man's answer to fancy steakhouse dinners, turning tough cube steak into tender, crispy glory. From Texas to Oklahoma through the Carolinas, this dish appeared on every diner menu and dinner table from the 1920s onward. You'd take cheap cube steak, already tenderized by the butcher's machine, season it with salt and pepper, then dredge it through flour, buttermilk, and flour again for maximum crust. The steak hit hot oil or lard in a cast iron skillet, frying until deep golden brown and crispy as fried chicken, hence the name. Then came the magic. Using the same skillet with all those brown bits, you'd make cream gravy by whisking flour into the hot oil, then slowly adding milk while stirring constantly until thick and silky. That peppery white gravy got ladled over the steak and mashed potatoes, creating a plate of pure comfort. Every bite delivered crispy outside, tender inside, and creamy gravy that tied it all together. This was celebration food disguised as everyday dinner. Ham and scalloped potatoes. Ham and scalloped potatoes transformed leftover holiday ham into a creamy layered masterpiece that made Tuesday feel like Sunday. This dish reached peak popularity in the 1950s and 60s when casseroles ruled American dinner tables and cream soups made everyone feel like a fancy cook. You'd slice potatoes paper thin using a knife or mandolin, then layer them in a buttered baking dish with cubed ham, thinly sliced onions, and a sprinkling of flour and butter between each layer. The sauce was simple: milk or cream mixed with salt, pepper, and sometimes a bit of mustard, poured over until almost covering the potatoes. As it baked low and slow for over an hour, those potatoes absorbed the creamy liquid and ham flavor, while the top turned golden and slightly crispy. The bottom layers became meltingly tender and rich, while the ham added salty, smoky depth throughout. This was one-dish cooking that required patience but little skill, perfect for working mothers who could prep it after breakfast and slide it in before the evening shift. Tuna burgers. Tuna burgers, the weird but wonderful protein patty that stretched expensive beef into 3 more dinners during wartime rationing and beyond. During World War II and lingering through the 1960s in budget-conscious homes, canned tuna became the miracle ingredient that could impersonate almost any meat. You'd drain 2 cans of tuna, flake it apart, then mix it with breadcrumbs, beaten eggs, minced onion, and sometimes pickle relish or celery for crunch. Some cooks added a spoonful of mayonnaise for moisture and richness. These tuna patties got formed like hamburgers, then pan-fried in butter or oil until golden brown and crispy on both sides. Served on hamburger buns with lettuce, tomato, and mayo or tartar sauce, they looked almost like regular burgers until that first bite revealed the oceanic truth. Kids either loved them or staged dinner table rebellions, but mothers loved how 2 79-cent cans could feed 6 people. This was make-do cooking that worked, even if nobody would confuse it with actual beef. Stuffed cabbage rolls. Stuffed cabbage rolls carried Eastern European immigrant traditions into American working-class kitchens, turning humble vegetables into labor-intensive love. Polish, Ukrainian, and Hungarian families brought these recipes through Ellis Island, making them in tenement kitchens from the 1890s through the 1970s. You'd carefully separate cabbage leaves, blanch them until pliable, then roll each leaf around a mixture of ground beef or pork mixed with rice, onions, and spices. The rolling required patience and skill. Too tight, and they'd burst; too loose, and they'd unravel. These precious bundles got nestled into a deep pot, covered with tomato sauce made from canned tomatoes, tomato paste, brown sugar, and vinegar for that essential sweet-sour balance. They simmered for hours until the cabbage melted tender and the flavors merged into something greater than their parts. The meat stayed moist, the rice absorbed all the tomatoey goodness, and the cabbage leaves became silky and rich. This was grandmother cooking, time-consuming and traditional, showing love through hours of work that resulted in a pot that fed the family for days. Meatloaf sandwiches. Meatloaf sandwiches were the planned leftover that many families preferred over the original dinner itself. The day after meatloaf night, cold slices of that dense, flavorful loaf got sandwiched between white bread or toast with mayonnaise, mustard, ketchup, or whatever condiments suited your taste. The meatloaf was actually better cold. It sliced cleanly without crumbling. The flavors had melted overnight, and the texture was firmer and more satisfying. Some families ate these sandwiches for breakfast with fried eggs on top. Others packed them in lunch pails for the factory floor or construction site. The beauty was the versatility. You could eat it hot or cold, plain or dressed up, between bread or on a fork, straight from the fridge at midnight. Working mothers loved meatloaf specifically because it was designed to stretch across multiple meals, making Monday's cooking effort pay dividends through Wednesday. These sandwiches represented Depression-era thinking that continued through generations. Waste nothing, plan ahead, and appreciate how leftovers often surpass the original meal. Spam and egg skillet. Spam and egg skillet was the breakfast for dinner that fed families when the grocery money ran out before payday arrived. Introduced by Hormel in 1937, Spam became the working-class protein that never spoiled, never disappointed, and always delivered salty, fatty satisfaction. You'd slice that gelatinous block into quarter-inch slabs, then fry them in a cast-iron skillet until the edges crisped up and turned golden brown with a slight char. The rendered fat stayed in the pan for frying eggs, which got cracked directly into that salty, porky grease and cooked until the whites set, but the yolks stayed runny. Served with toast or biscuits to soak up the yolk, this meal cost under $1 and took 10 minutes to make. The Spam brought intense saltiness and meaty chew. The eggs added richness and protein, and together they created something satisfying despite their humble origins. This wasn't gourmet cooking. It was practical fuel for bodies that worked hard. It kept soldiers fed during World War II and working families fed for decades after. Turkey pot pie. Turkey pot pie transformed Thanksgiving leftovers into a golden-crusted masterpiece that stretched the holiday bird through another meal. The day after Thanksgiving, smart cooks would simmer the turkey carcass into rich broth, then use that liquid to make creamy filling with cubed turkey meat, frozen mixed vegetables, and a roux-thickened gravy seasoned with thyme and sage. This mixture bubbled in a deep dish, then got topped with either pie crust, biscuit dough, or in modern times, refrigerated crescent roll dough that baked up golden and flaky. As it cooked, the filling bubbled up around the edges while the crust turned mahogany brown and crispy. Breaking through that crust released aromatic steam, and each spoonful delivered tender turkey, soft vegetables, and rich gravy all bound together. This was thrift elevated to art, where a holiday splurge got extended through several more dinners without anyone complaining about boring leftovers. The pot pie felt special enough to serve company, satisfying enough to fill hungry workers, and economical enough to fit the tightest budget. Bologna boats. Bologna boats were the kid-friendly dinner that turned cheap lunch meat into something resembling an actual meal. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, creative mothers discovered that thick-cut bologna slices would curl up like little boats when baked, creating edible vessels perfect for filling with mashed potatoes, mac and cheese, or scrambled eggs. You'd buy those quarter-inch thick bologna rounds from the deli, score the edges to prevent excessive curling, then bake them until they formed shallow cups with crispy caramelized edges. The bologna fat rendered out and the meat firmed up, creating something that actually had texture beyond slimy deli meat. Kids loved the novelty of eating out of meat boats, which made mothers willing to serve what was essentially processed mystery meat for dinner. The bologna added salty, smoky flavor to whatever filling you used, and the crispy edges provided essential crunch. This was peak convenience cooking meets kid-focused marketing, where presentation mattered more than nutrition, and getting children to eat dinner without complaint was victory enough. Bean and bacon soup with bread. Bean and bacon soup with bread was the Depression-era staple that fed families for days on a couple dollars worth of ingredients. From the 1930s through the 1960s, dried beans remained one of the cheapest proteins available, and a few strips of bacon added enough flavor to make a pot of beans taste like something special. You'd soak navy beans or Great Northern beans overnight, then simmer them for hours with bacon, onions, carrots, and celery until everything broke down into thick, creamy comfort. Some cooks mashed half the beans against the pot side to make it even thicker and creamier. That bacon added essential smokiness and fat, while the vegetables contributed sweetness and depth. Served with hunks of bread for dunking, often day-old bread from the bakery's discount bin, this meal stuck to your ribs and kept you warm through cold evenings. The soup only got better over the next few days as flavors developed, making it the ultimate make-ahead meal for working families. This was peasant food, honest and humble, that kept people alive and satisfied. Cheesy potato casserole. Cheesy potato casserole, also known as funeral potatoes in some regions, was the ultimate comfort side dish that appeared at every church potluck and family gathering. During the 1960s and 70s, this dish reached peak popularity when convenience foods made every home cook feel capable of producing restaurant-quality results. You'd mix thawed frozen hash browns with cream of chicken soup, sour cream, melted butter, and shredded cheddar cheese in obscene quantities. The mixture went into a buttered 9x13 pan, got topped with crushed cornflakes mixed with more melted butter, then baked until golden and bubbling. The result was pure indulgence, creamy, cheesy, crunchy, and rich enough to clog arteries just by looking at it. This wasn't everyday dinner food, it was special occasion eating that happened to appear at every occasion. The dish earned its funeral potatoes nickname because it showed up at every wake and memorial dinner, bringing comfort through fat, carbs, and cheese when words failed. This was emotional eating, using food to heal hurt and bring people together. Corn pone. Before sliced bread became a thing, mountain families were already perfecting their own daily staple that could outlast store-bought loaves by weeks. In the late 1800s through the Great Depression, corn pone served as the foundation of mountain survival when wheat flour cost precious cash money that families simply didn't have. Women would mix coarse cornmeal with just enough water or buttermilk to form a thick paste, adding a pinch of salt and sometimes bacon grease for richness. The mixture was shaped by hand into thick, flat cakes and either baked on a hot stone by the fire or fried in a cast-iron skillet over wood coals. The outside developed a golden, crackling crust, while the inside stayed dense and moist, with a slightly gritty texture that satisfied hunger like nothing else could. A woman's reputation often rested on her corn pone recipe. Today's cornbread mixes can't touch the staying power of hand-mixed corn pone. Don't let these recipes disappear again. Subscribe and join our retro family for more forgotten favorites. Groundhog stew. If you think groundhogs were just for weather predictions, mountain families knew better. These plump, slow-moving rodents provided the first fresh meat after winter's lean months. In February, when families' preserved meat supplies ran dangerously low, adult males would hunt the newly awakened groundhogs emerging from hibernation. These animals had spent months building up fat reserves, making them surprisingly tender and flavorful. After skinning and cleaning, the groundhog was cut into chunks and soaked overnight in salt water to remove any wild gaminess. The meat was then browned in pork fat before being covered with water, wild onions, and whatever root vegetables the family had stored, typically potatoes, carrots, and turnips. The stew simmered for hours over a wood fire until the meat fell off the bone and the broth turned rich and golden. One groundhog could feed a family of 6 for days, making it precious winter protein when other meat was scarce. Possum and sweet potatoes. Before you wrinkle your nose, understand that possum was considered fine dining in mountain communities, especially when prepared with sweet potatoes for Sunday dinner. This dish represented the pinnacle of Appalachian game cooking, turning a humble marsupial into a feast worthy of special occasions. Possums were typically caught in late fall when they'd been feeding on persimmons and acorns, giving their meat a surprisingly sweet flavor. The preparation began with careful skinning and cleaning, followed by a thorough scrubbing and overnight soaking in salt water. The possum was then parboiled to remove any remaining wild taste before being stuffed with sweet potatoes, wild onions, and sage. The whole animal was roasted slowly in a Dutch oven buried in coals, basting frequently with its own fat mixed with molasses. The sweet potatoes inside absorbed the rich, slightly sweet meat juices, while the skin turned crispy and golden. Served with cornbread and wild greens, this was mountain fine dining that would make city folks reconsider their assumptions about country cooking. Corn dodgers. These weren't bread rolls, they were portable survival food that could keep a mountain man fed for days on the trail. Corn dodgers earned their name from Civil War soldiers who dodged bullets while eating them, but mountain families had been making them long before the war. The recipe was brutally simple: coarse cornmeal mixed with just enough water to form a stiff dough that could be shaped by hand. Some cooks added a pinch of salt or a spoonful of bacon grease, but purists made them with nothing but meal and water. The shaped dodgers were baked on hot stones around the fire or fried in a skillet until they formed a hard, golden crust that protected a dense interior. These weren't meant to be eaten fresh. Corn dodgers were designed to be carried in a pocket or pack where they'd keep for weeks without spoiling. When hunger struck, you'd gnaw on one like hardtack, letting your saliva slowly soften the rock-hard exterior. They tasted like concentrated corn and determination. Rabbit fricassee. Wild rabbits provided year-round protein for mountain families, and rabbit fricassee turned this small game into an elegant dish that graced Sunday tables and special occasions. Unlike simple fried rabbit, fricassee required finesse and patience, transforming tough wild rabbit into fork-tender meat swimming in rich, creamy gravy. The process began with jointing young rabbits and soaking the pieces in salt water to remove any gamey taste. The rabbit was then dredged in seasoned flour and browned slowly in bacon grease until golden on all sides. After browning, the meat was covered with water or milk and simmered gently with wild onions and herbs until the meat practically fell off the bone. The cooking liquid was thickened with flour to create a velvety gravy that coated the tender rabbit pieces. Some mountain cooks added wild mushrooms or early spring greens to stretch the dish further. The finished fricassee was served over biscuits or cornbread, turning one small rabbit into a meal fit for company. This dish proved that mountain cooking could be as refined as any city cuisine. Pickled pig's feet and cornbread. When families butchered their yearly hog, nothing went to waste, including the feet that became a treasured delicacy through the ancient art of pickling. This wasn't desperation food. Properly prepared pickled pig's feet were considered a treat that graced special occasion tables and provided protein-rich sustenance through long winters. The preparation began immediately after butchering, while the feet were fresh and clean. The pig's feet were thoroughly scrubbed and boiled until the meat was tender and the skin gelatinous. Hot vinegar seasoned with bay leaves, peppercorns, and salt was poured over the cooked feet, which were then packed into stone crocks or glass jars. After weeks of curing, the pig's feet emerged transformed. The meat falling off the bone, the skin silky and flavorful, all permeated with tangy spiced vinegar. Served cold with fresh cornbread to soak up the flavorful pickling liquid, this dish provided essential protein and made every part of the precious hog last through winter. The gelatin-rich broth was considered especially nourishing for pregnant women and growing children. Fatback. Before refrigeration, fatback was the bacon that never went bad. Pure pork fat that served as both seasoning and survival food for mountain families. This wasn't the streaky bacon we know today, but thick slabs of pure fat from the pig's back that could be stored for months without spoiling when properly cured with salt. Mountain families depended on fatback to add flavor and essential calories to otherwise bland survival foods. Sliced thin, fatback was fried slowly until it rendered into crispy cracklings swimming in pure lard. Both the cracklings and the rendered fat were culinary gold. The cracklings added crunch and porky flavor to cornbread, while the lard was saved for cooking everything from vegetables to desserts. A small piece of fatback could transform a pot of beans or greens from subsistence food into something approaching luxury. The fat provided essential calories that helped mountain families survive harsh winters when fresh food was scarce. Fatback was also portable protein that could be carried on hunting trips or work expeditions, providing energy and flavor when times got tough. Corn chowder. When sweet corn season peaked in late summer, mountain families turned surplus ears into rich, creamy chowder that could feed a crowd and celebrate the harvest. This wasn't thin corn soup. It was thick, substantial chowder that could serve as a complete meal when accompanied by fresh biscuits or cornbread. The preparation began with cutting fresh corn kernels off the cob, but the real flavor came from scraping the cobs with a knife to extract the sweet, milky liquid that would thicken the chowder naturally. The corn and its milk were combined with diced potatoes, wild onions, and sometimes salt pork or bacon for richness. The mixture was simmered slowly until the potatoes broke down and the corn released its starch, creating a naturally thick, creamy texture without the need for flour or cream. Some mountain cooks added fresh milk or cream when available, but the dish was designed to be delicious even when dairy products were scarce. The finished chowder was sweet, savory, and satisfying, a bowl full of summer sunshine that could warm the soul even as autumn chills began to creep into the mountains.